Duke the Lost Engine by the Reverend W. Awdry. Read and adapted by Joshua Boston. Grandpuff. One winter's night, when the cold wind blew, the engines found it hard to sleep. "What we need," suggested Toby, "is to listen to a story." "Yes," agreed Percy, "a mysterious story." "But," added Duck, "it must have a happy ending." "Driver told me a story," said Thomas, so everyone listened. "Once upon a time," began Thomas, "there were 3 little engines who lived in their own little shed on their own little railway. Their names were Duke, who was painted brown, Stuart, painted green, and Falcon, painted blue. Duke was the oldest. He had been the first engine on the line and was named after His Grace the Duke of Sodor. He was proud of this and wanted everything just so. Whenever he saw the other engines do something that they shouldn't, he would say, "That would never suit His Grace." Other engines came and went, but Duke outlasted them all. Stuart and Falcon used to call Duke Grandpuff. He was fond of them and tried to keep them in order. They were fond of him too, as he was so wise and kind, but they often got very tired of hearing all about His Grace. Sometimes they would wink at each other and tease him, chanting solemnly, "Engines come and engines go, but Grandpuff goes on forever." "You impertinent scallywags," Duke would say indignantly. "Whatever are you young engines coming to nowadays?" "Never mind, Grandpuff, we're only young ones." "Well, you'd better mind, unless you want to end up like Smudger." "Ooh, Grandpuff, whatever happened?" "Smudger," said Duke, "was our number 2 from America, and very cocky. He rode roughly and often came off the rails. I warned him to be careful, but he took no notice. 'Listen, Dukey,' he snarled, 'in the States we don't care a dime for a few spills.' 'We do here,' I said, but Smudger just laughed. Until one day manager said he was going to make him useful at last. Smudger stopped laughing then." "Well, why? What did he do?" "He turned him into a generator. He's still out there behind our shed. He'll never move again." After that, Stuart and Falcon were unusually good for several days and became really useful engines. All 3 of them were happy together for many years. But then hard times came. The mines in the hills closed one by one, and the engines had little to do. At last, the railway closed too. People came to buy the engines. "We'll take Stuart and Falcon," they said, but no one wanted Duke. They thought him too old. "Cheer up, Grandpuff," called Stuart as they went away. "We will find a nice railway, and then you can come and keep us in order." They all laughed and tried to be brave and cheerful, but not one of them thought that their dreams would ever come true. Duke's driver and fireman oiled and greased him one last time. They sheeted him snugly in the shed and said goodbye. Then they had to go away and find work. Duke was alone, locked away in the shed. "Where's His Grace?" he wondered. "It's not like him to forget me." But His Grace had been killed during the war, and the new Duke, a boy, had never heard of his little engine. "Oh well," sighed Duke to himself, "I'll go to sleep. It'll help to pass the time." The years passed. Winter torrents washed soil from the hills around the shed. Trees and bushes grew all around. You wouldn't have known a shed was there, let alone a little engine alone, asleep inside. "That's not a happy ending," cried Percy. "Ah," murmured Thomas, "there might be one, but that will have to wait another time. However," he went on, "did you ever guess about what happened to Stuart and Falcon?" No one replied. "Well," said Thomas, "they went to Mr. Percival in the Skarloey Railway. He gave them new coats of paint and new names." "So Peter Sam was originally Stuart?" asked Henry. "And Sir Handel Falcon?" inquired James. "Yes," replied Thomas, "and they prefer their new names. Now that was a long time ago,
But they never forgot Grandpuff. Skarloey often says that they talk about him when they're alone. So it's no surprise that they were excited to hear that the Duke was coming to Skarloey and Renee's 100th birthday, said Duck in surprise. I can't believe I lied to Peter Sam and told him the wrong thing. You didn't lie to him, reassured Edward. You didn't know this story till now. And Peter Sam and Sir Handel were most disappointed with the Duke that actually came to their railway, added Thomas, for he was only a man. But we will say no more, or Thomas and I will spoil the next story. Bulldog. One morning, Percy was impatient. He was wearing a new coat of paint and longed for everyone to see it. The other engines were still dozing, but not Percy. Driver should be here by now. What's he doing?
Sleeping, grunted Gordon.
But that means I'll be late. The coaches will be waiting and the passengers will get cross.
Rubbish, huffed Henry.
It's still early, added James. You just want to show off. No, I don't. Never mind, Percy, said Thomas. It'll soon be time for work, but be careful, or you might run into danger, and Duke is not here to save you.
Duke? stuttered Toby. You mean our hero?
A large painting of Duke hung in the engine shed. The very same, said Thomas. Driver told me the story. Listen. And this is the story Thomas told them. Long ago, when Peter Sam was still called Stuart and painted green, and Sir Handel was still called Falcon and painted blue, they worked with Duke on his old railway. But Falcon was new to the line and had a lot to learn. One day, the manager came to see him. Falcon, I'm pleased with your work so far. Now you must learn a difficult part of the line. We call it the mountain road. Falcon was excited. Oh, yes, please, sir. So tomorrow, when you have a new coat of paint, you will go double-heading on it with Duke. He will explain everything. Falcon didn't like this. Heh, he thought. Duke's an old fusspot and a regular old fuddy-duddy. Next day came. Duke's train was one for holidaymakers. He called it the picnic. Falcon was ready when Duke arrived. Duke drew forward beside him. Listen, he warned, the mountain road is difficult. You'll take the train, and I'll couple up in front and lead. No, replied Falcon, I'll lead. How can I learn the route with you lumbering ahead and blocking the view? Suit yourself, said Duke shortly, but never mind the view. Look at the track. The engine soon set off. Look at the track, puffed Duke again on starting. Never mind the view. Fusspot, replied Falcon. Fuddy-duddy, fuddy-duddy, fuddy-duddy. They rattled through the first tunnel, looped round, recrossed the river, and entered the second, climbing all the time. The engine's speed grew slower and slower. Don't dawdle, urged Falcon. No hurry, puffed Duke stolidly. The tunnel was curved and pitch dark. Falcon didn't like the tunnel. He felt stifled and couldn't see. I want to get out, he sighed. Presently, the light grew, and 2 ribbons of track appeared in the gloom. Watch the track, warned Duke. Fusspot, scoffed Falcon. The tunnel mouth grew larger and larger, till at last they burst into sunshine. The line here swung sharply right. It was laid on a ledge cutting a hillside. Below laid the valley up which they had come. Track and buildings looked tiny, like toys. No one quite knows what happened next. Duke said there must have been something on the track and Falcon hadn't kept a good lookout. But Falcon said that he was dazzled, so how could he keep a good lookout? Anyway, one moment everything seemed safe, but then suddenly, just as the coaches barely cleared the tunnel, Falcon lurched. His front wheels derailed, crunched over sleepers and ballast, and he came to rest with one wheel uncomfortably over the edge. Duke had saved Falcon. Now he held on grimly with locked wheels and taut couplings. Young idiot, he hissed. Stop shaking! I can't hold you if you shake! Falcon tried hard to stop shuddering. Duke's driver and fireman quickly blocked his wheels and strengthened the couplings between the two engines.
"Thank you," said Duke. "Now I can manage."
With Duke secured, the two crews, helped by a plate layer, propped up Falcon's front end to make the two engines safe again. They were looking forward to a rest when more trouble came. Duke began wheezing in an alarming way. His fireman ran to the cab. "Water!" he cried. "Duke needs water! Quickly!" Luckily, the plate layer's cottage stood nearby. He explained to his wife, and the passengers borrowed jugs, buckets, kettles, saucepans, jars, and anything else, in fact, which could hold water. They formed a chain from the well to the engine and passed them from hand to hand. The fireman, meanwhile, reduced his fire and anxiously watched the gauge. It was hot and tiring work, for Duke needed many gallons. At last, the fireman shouted cheerfully, "We're winning! Don't weaken!" And they all set to work again with a will. They cheered again when the breakdown gang arrived. They showed other passengers how to lever Falcon back to the rails. All the while, Duke was building more strength, and at last, with everyone's help, he was able to put all of Falcon's 4 driving wheels back onto the rails. Then they started off once more. The manager was waiting for them at the top station. He apologized for the accident and thanked the passengers for their help. "Not at all," they said. "We admire the way you put things right, and we quite enjoyed the adventure." They thanked Duke and his crew for preventing a nasty accident. "Your Duke," they said, "is a hero. He stood firm like a bulldog and wouldn't let go." Falcon was grateful too. "Thank you for saving me, Duke. I don't know why you even bothered after I had been so rude."
"Oh well," replied Duke. "You just had a new coat of paint. It would have been a pity if you'd rolled down the mountain and spoiled it. That would never have suited his grace."
You can't win. Ever since Skarloey and Rheneas' 100th birthday, Peter Sam had been worried. He kept on saying that the real Duke never came.
"Rubbish," said Duncan. "Of course he was real."
"All the same,"
Peter Sam persisted,
"he wasn't our Duke."
"Our Duke," said Sir Handel, "is an engine."
"You're as bad as he is. All engine dukes were scrapped. Ask Duck."
"Duck doesn't know everything," Skarloey put in quietly. "Tell us about him, you two." Here is one of the stories that Peter Sam and Sir Handel told about Grandpuff. It happened long ago when they were still called Stuart and Falcon respectively and painted green and blue. Duke's picnic was a train for summer visitors. It was his special train. Many people came year after year to see the mountains and the lakes, and most of all, Duke. He always pulled it even if he felt poorly.
"I mustn't disappoint my friends," he would say. "That would never suit his grace."
Every morning, he took his passengers up the line and stopped anywhere they wanted. He and his driver knew all the best places for picnics. "Beep, beep," he whistled as they waved goodbye.
"Please be ready when I come back for you. Otherwise, we might miss your boat to the mainland, and that would never do."
One day, Duke felt poorly after his first picnic journey. He was short of steam and glad of a rest before starting back. His driver and fireman had just finished cleaning his tubes when Stuart bustled in.
"Hello, Grandpuff,"
he teased.
"Are you short of puff today?"
"Nothing of the sort. This is routine maintenance."
"Tell you what, Grandpuff, you're getting old, and you need to take care. We'll have to keep you in order, or one day you'll break down."
"Huh!" snorted Duke. "That'll be the day. You keep me in order. Impudence."
He puffed away, whooshing crossly from his draincocks. But Duke couldn't stay cross for long. It was a lovely evening. All the picnic parties were ready, the coaches ran well, and they lost no time anywhere.
"Couldn't be better, couldn't be better,"
he chundered happily. Then they began to climb. The work was harder, but Duke didn't mind.
"I've plenty of steam, I've plenty of steam,"
he panted to himself.
"We'll be up in a couple of puffs."
He needed more than that, though. Soon, Duke's puffs turned into wheezes. His valves were leaking steam.
"It's not so easy, it's not so easy," he croaked. "My old valves would start blowing now, but I'll manage."
But the leaks became worse and worse, and soon he groaned, strained, and gasped hoarsely with escaping steam. At last, they reached the next station. Duke's driver examined him carefully while the conductor went to telephone. Anxious passengers gathered around. "Duke can take you to the harbor, but he might be late," the conductor reported, "so 2 engines are coming to help. With luck, we'll be away in 15 minutes. You'll easily catch your boat." Falcon buffered up in front. "Poor old Grandpuff," he hooshed importantly. "What a shame you've broken down."
Beep, beep, beep,
whistled Stuart cheekily.
This is a day, this is a day.
He was coupled up behind. "Are you ready?" whistled Falcon.
Yes, I am,
replied Stuart, and away they went. Falcon had left his train at the middle station. When he arrived there, the cavalcade split up. Falcon went down to the port with Duke's picnic, while Stuart headed Falcon's train with Duke coupled behind. Stuart was excited.
Fancy me rescuing Grandpuff. This is a day, this is a day,
he chortled gleefully.
Poor Grandpuff,
he thought.
He's much too old. We'll have to keep him in order now. Kindly, but firmly, that's it. We'll allow him to have a run sometimes, but Falcon and I will do the real work. Grandpuff will be cross, but we can't help that. Poor old engine, he
puffed kindly. But Duke was by no means crippled. He still had plenty of steam left in him. His valves sounded worse than they were. He could have kept his train, but his driver had said, "No, our passengers will only be worried." Duke agreed. He didn't want to spoil their day. He listened to Stuart chortling and smiled. He and his driver had their own little joke ready. First, they used enough steam to keep moving, but the last half-mile was uphill. "Now," said his driver. He advanced the regulator, and Duke responded with a will. He puffed and roared as though he was pushing the whole train's weight before him. The noise echoed everywhere. People heard it and ran to see what was happening. When they reached the workstation, everyone cheered. Duke was then uncoupled and went along the loop to the water tank. A boy was on the platform.
"What happened, Daddy?"
he asked.
"They don't usually need 2 engines on trains."
"Well, son," replied his father, "it is unusual, but today was different. Stuart broke down, you see, and they had to call Duke out to help him. It sounds as if he had a hard job, too." Duke and his driver's joke had worked.
"Well, for crying out loud! Fiddlesticks!"
exclaimed Stuart, and he vanished in a cloud of steam. Duke wheezed alongside.
"Poor old engine," he teased. "It's no good, Stuart. You can't win."
Sleeping Beauty. It was a beautiful night on the island of Sodor. The day's work was done, and the engines puffed safely home. "Thomas," whispered Percy, "will you tell us the end of the story?" "You mean the one about Duke, the lost engine?"
"Exactly,"
said Henry. "But please remind us about the story so far," added James. So Thomas began, and here's the rest of the story he told. Duke was old and lived with 2 engines called Stuart and Falcon. They teased Duke and called him Grandpuff, but they were all happy together. Then their line was closed down, and the young engines went away. Duke was left alone in the shed. He went to sleep, and everything around him changed. But Duke was never forgotten. Years went by. Duke's story soon spread. The engines told Mr. Hugh told Mr. Percival told the owner told His Grace told Mr. Fergus Duncan told the thin clergyman, and the thin clergyman told the fat one. That is why, one morning not long ago, the 2 clergymen and Mr. Fergus Duncan were looking at maps. "Our railway," said Mr. Fergus Duncan,
is laid on the bed of the old one, but swings around to the end of the road south of that village. The old line kept straight on. It went north of the village, and then to the mountains. The maps show the works at the old station. If Duke is anywhere, he's there."
"Are you writing another book, sir?"
asked Bert when the small railway engines were told the news.
"Yes,
Said the thin clergyman.
but not about you.
He smiled at their downcast faces.
Cheer up.
He went on.
It's about a nice old engine who is lost. But if you're good, the artist might put you in the pictures."
Okay, thank you, sir.
Said Rex. So the thin clergyman told them about Duke and Falcon and Stuart.
"So you see,"
He continued.
"poor Duke was left alone,
The three small engines sighed sympathetically.
and we want to find him, and mend him, and make him happy again. Your controller wants to help, but he can't if you're naughty."
Rex, Mike, and Bert promised to be as good as gold. Everyone set off for the mountains far away. The three men spent days and days at the old station. They came up every morning on Bert's train. He always whistled good luck as they walked up the track, but they had nothing in the evening except for scratches and torn clothes. They wouldn't give up, though. "Duke's there somewhere," they said. The search grew harder and harder as they scrambled over hills and struggled over ditches. At last, their search ended, quite by accident. The fat clergyman, while scrambling for a hillock, clawed on something which wasn't there. He crashed through a hole and landed, legs astride, on Duke's saddle tank.
Oh, Sleeping Beauty himself!
He shouted. The thin clergyman and Mr. Fergus Duncan peeped through the hole above. "Excuse me," inquired Duke. "Are you a vandal? Driver told me vandals break in and smash things." The fat clergyman ruefully felt his bruises.
Bless you, no!
He laughed,
I'm quite respectable. I dropped in because I couldn't find your door.
and he told Duke about Falcon and Stuart. "So they did remember," sighed Duke happily. "Then, does his grace approve?"
Yes, he's coming.
"To see me? How kind. But I'm all dirty. That'll never do. Please clean me." So they set to work. And by the time Mr. Fergus Duncan had fetched his grace, Duke was the cleanest of anyone in the shed. Early next morning, Mike brought workmen and tools. They enlarged the fat clergyman's hole, lifted Duke out, and put him on a low loader to take him away by road. "I'd be ashamed," Duke protested, "to travel by road. It's undignified." "I'm sorry, Duke," said his grace, "but the small railway has no suitable cars." Duke gave in then, but so many people came out and greeted him that he felt better. "So they still remember me," he thought happily. Donald was waiting with a flatbed. Everyone cheered when Duke was lifted onto it, and still more when he started along the big railway on the last stage of his journey to his new home. Peter, Sam, and Sir Handel were on early turn. They peeped out of the shed, ready with a big welcome. "He's there," they whispered to each other. "Shh, he's asleep." Duke opened his eyes. "You woke me up," he grumbled. "In my young days, engines were—"
"Seen and not heard, Grandpa, remember?"
"I remember," said Duke. "Two idle good-for-nothings called Falcon and Stuart."
"Good for you, Grandpa. We'll all be back to work tomorrow."
"We're glad you've come. We can keep you in order now."
"Keep me in order? Ha! Impertinence! Be off with you! Impudent scallywags!"
The pair chuffed away, well content. But Duke's old eyes twinkled, and for the first time in years, he smiled as he dozed in the sun. And that, said Thomas, is the whole story. Did you like it? "Oh, yes," agreed the engines, "especially the happy ending." "I'm so happy for Peter, Sam, and Sir Handel," said Edward. "Those three are going to be happy for many more years to come, now that they are reunited once more." And soon, Thomas and the others happily fell asleep, too.